Hello, my name is Patrick Casterly. I'm the Design Studio Coordinator at the University of Ibadan in Ibadan, Nigeria, and I work for RICE 360 Institute for Global Health Technologies, and today's lecture is on product requirements. So your product requirements are sometimes called your product design specifications. And your product requirements are a list of requirements that must be met in order for the product to be deemed successful in the eyes of your customer or your client. In fact, you will derive your product requirements primarily through conversations and interviews with your customer, but you can also derive product requirements through other primary and secondary research, like performing research on competing products or performing market analysis. And early in the design process, your list of product requirements will sometimes be broad and open-ended, but as you learn more and more about the problem space and get a better understanding about what your client wants, you'll be able to change your product requirements such that they're more detailed and more specific. There are a wide variety of product requirement categories. Your client might request that your product perform a task at a certain level of accuracy, for example, or they may request that the solution is easy to use or easy to maintain. The point is, early on in the design process, the client will give you broad goals that you are trying to achieve, but your goal through primary and secondary research is to take those broad objectives and then assign metrics to them such that they become more detailed and specific, and ultimately you can test them to see if your product is fulfilling your client needs. So in this slide and the next slide, I'm providing you with some high-level categories in which your product requirements exist. And you can take a look at these categories to help define what your own product requirements are. And furthermore, these lists can help guide you as you are conducting research, especially as you are interviewing your clients to really understand what type of solution your client is looking for. And when you're writing good product requirements, you'll want to be as specific and quantitative as possible. This will allow you to test whether or not you've achieved your specific product requirement. For example, you want to use target values wherever possible, and then you'll want to use wording such as exact, less than, greater than. So your solution, if it's a piece of hardware, might have to be exactly 2.5 inches long or less than 2.5 centimeters wide. And as you conduct more and more research, you'll be able to revisit your product requirements list and make it more and more specific and quantitative. And as you advance through the engineering design process and continue to gather more research, your design requirements will evolve from a basic and vague state into something more advanced and specific. For example, in an early meeting with a client, your client might request that the product be quickly assembled. But with further engagement with your client and perhaps some secondary research, you realize that the client is actually asking that your product be more quickly assembled than a competing alternative. So you could change your design requirement such that the language says that the product must be assembled in less than 10 minutes. Furthermore, perhaps your client states early on that the product must withstand hot temperatures for long periods of time. But after you visit the operating environment in which your solution will exist and conduct further interviews and continue to do research, you'll realize that the product requirement is actually that the product should operate continuously at temperatures of up to 40 degrees Celsius for 6 hours without malfunctioning. So you can see how your product requirements evolve and become more specific with time. Here I've provided you with an example product requirement list. In this scenario, a client has approached your design team and requested that you develop a solution which continuously monitors an infant's body temperature and alerts a caregiver when the infant's body temperature falls outside of a healthy range. And you'll see if you look through this list of product requirements that some product requirements are quite basic and some are more advanced. An example of an advanced product requirement is the first one. The solution must measure the temperature to an accuracy within plus or minus 0.3 degrees Celsius. Perhaps this was a specific requirement from your client, or perhaps when you were performing secondary research, you learned that competing products measure temperature to this level of specificity. But there are some existing product requirements on this list which could use improvement. Let's take a look at size, for example. So the requirement, as it is stated, says that the size of the solution must have a small footprint, should be portable, and can be left at a patient bedside. Well, without actually going to the patient bedside, you won't know how much space you have to work with. So in order to get a more specific definition of this product requirement, you'll have to go to the patient bedside, take a measurement of how much space is available, and then you can derive your specific measurable and quantitative product requirement after conducting that type of study. And if we look at each product requirement, we'll see that these requirements don't state what the solution is, but they do state what your solution must achieve. For example, if we take a look at the alarm requirement, we'll see that the alarm must alert a caregiver that the baby's body temperature falls outside of a certain range. It doesn't say how that caregiver should be alerted. Perhaps the solution will be an SMS text message, perhaps it will be a blinking light on the device, or even a loud buzzer which sounds. Unless specifically requested by our client, these product requirements do not define what the solution is, but they only state what the solution must achieve. A good product requirements list is a fundamental component of the engineering design process. With a good list of product requirements, you'll have a better understanding about what your customer's needs and wants are, and you'll be able to develop a solution which is differentiated from that of your competition. Furthermore, when your product requirements are quantitative and specific, you'll be able to test each one of those product requirements such that you'll know whether or not you have succeeded in developing a solution for your client. Thank you very much for attending this lecture.